best things in life are free. That includes campsites. Today we're talking about how you can truly camp for free in some of the United States' most beautiful and pristine landscapes. It's called boondocking, and if you're not familiar with that term or practice, you're going to love this episode. So let's get started. Welcome to the Adventure Travel Show podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks. On this show, we learn the how-tos of adventure travel so that you get the skills, knowledge, and confidence to get out there and hike, bike, and paddle your way around the country and the world. You'll get terrific adventure travel trip ideas on my companion podcast, the Active Travel Adventures podcast. Did you know that the U.S. government owns almost 30% of the United States landmass? That's over 640 million acres. And when I say the U.S. government, that means us, we the people, the public. This is our land, and we have access to it. And today, you're going to be learning how to camp on much of this land for free. And if you happen to be from another country, you're welcome to use this land too. We're going to be talking about a practice called boondocking. And today we're going to discuss what boondocking is, how you do it, how do you find these boondocking locations, and the rules and etiquette, plus some tips about how to boondock. But first, let's define boondocking. Boondocking is when you are camping off the grid for free, although sometimes you might need to get a permit. This means that you have to bring your own water and either figure out a way to do your own power or do without. You're not going to have any amenities like a campfire ring or grill, most likely. No picnic table, no water spigot, no electrical or sewer hookups. You generally don't even have access to even a composting toilet or a porta-john. You're going to need to be completely self-sufficient. Boondocking is often referred to as dry camping or dispersed camping. It means you're camping outside of an established campground area. The dry camping term is obvious, as we just discussed the lack of amenities that you're going to have when you do boondock. But dispersed is a term that's often used by the government agencies that allow us to boondock on our managed land, because the goal is for us to disperse amongst these great lands and choose sites that minimize our impact on the land. When you boondock on federal land, all you usually get is a solid service onto which you park your RV or your camper, a place to pitch your tent, and that's about it. Unlike traditional campgrounds, outside of the ranger who's going to oversee the general rules of boondocking in the national forest or whatever the public land is, there's no park manager that oversees your campsite, nobody to go ask for some help on this and that. You're pretty much on your own. Some agencies that allow boondocking on some of their lands include the National Forest Service, the BLM, otherwise known as the Bureau of Land Management, USACE, the Army Corps of Engineers, sometimes just ACE for Army Corps of Engineers, the Bureau of Reclamation, the U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife, and occasionally you'll even find some state parks or state lands. I'm going to have links to these and all the sites and all sorts of helpful links on the Adventure Travel Show podcast.com/boondocking page. Here's one really important point. You must make sure that you're actually boondocking on land that permits it. So don't just go willy-nilly and camp on some vacant land that you think might be near the national forest, or you might be unpleasantly awakened by a sheriff or an upset farmer, maybe with a rifle. So be safe there, be smart. When in doubt, ask permission. Even if it is private land, perhaps if you're out in the middle of nowhere, it wouldn't hurt to go ask, could you hang out on the corner of the property away from the livestock or whatever for the night if you get in a jam. And also, before you even boondock on federal lands, you want to stop by the local ranger station to find out what their particular boondocking rules and parameters are. You can usually pick up a really nice map too, as well as getting some recommendations about pretty sites and where you might want to go within whatever the land area is. Federal lands aren't the only places you can boondock. Many Walmarts, Cabela's, and Bass Pro Shops allow you to park in their parking lots. Always check with the management first. You can call ahead if you'd like. You usually have to park in a designated area far away from the store. Usually at the back end of the store, you'll often see other RVs there, so that'll tell you kind of where you can go. And you have to stay in your vehicle. And that means you can't set up awnings, you can't set up tables and chairs and sit outside. You're just allowed to park there. But you'll have access to a bathroom. So please don't be going in the bathroom in the parking lot, even at night. Okay? Please don't break the rules. These companies are very accommodating, and if people abuse them, they are less likely to be accommodating in the future. And also, please try to buy something while you're there in appreciation, whether it's gas, food, snacks, whatever, just to say thanks. So why would you want to stay in a parking lot? There's a couple reasons, for sure. Sometimes you're just trying to get to someplace, or it's dark and you know you're just going to wake up and start driving again, so what difference does it make if the place is pretty if you can't see it? And a lot of times the pretty places or the campsites might be off the highway a ways, whereas these stores might be a little easier to reach. Or maybe the weather's deteriorated so much that it's no longer safe for you to continue driving. This could be a perfect place for you to get off the highway and just hang out for a little time in the Walmart or Cabela's parking lot. They're readily available across the country. They're generally pretty accessible. You don't have to worry about a bad road to get there, and you're not wasting a lot of time trying to find a campsite when all you're trying to do is get from one place to the other. It's also nice to pull into one of these parking lots if you just need to take a break or a nap. Or if you're on a tight budget and you're uncomfortable truly being alone by boondocking in the wild, using the parking lot is a great way to save a few bucks every once in a while and can help stretch your camping budget when you don't have any kind of camping fees to worry about. Some folks jokingly call boondocking in a Walmart parking lot Wallydocking. And for that matter, let's say you camp on a friend's driveway. That's referred to as mooch-docking. In fact, the day before, 2 nights before my last night in North Carolina before I headed out, my girlfriends had a little get-together to send me off on my way. And since there were some adult beverages involved, rather than driving home that night and not wanting to possibly bring COVID into my girlfriend's home just in case I was an asymptomatic carrier, I just simply crashed in Sophie in her driveway and then just headed out first thing in the morning. I said my goodbyes that night, woke up, 5:30, whatever it was, and took off. So you can mooch dock as well. So we've talked about using the parking lot option as boondocking, and yes, it's great for saving money and as a stopgap measure, whether it's a weather or a time constraint or whatever. But let's go to the really fun boondocking when we're taking advantage of the great and beautiful landscapes of the United States. Now, even if you check my links and you find a great place on paper to boondock, it doesn't mean that the site's appropriate for you. There's some things you need to consider, especially before you drive down some unpaved road you aren't familiar with. Number 1, you want to think about your vehicle. A, do you have 4-wheel drive in case you get stuck? My Sophie van does not, so I'm hesitant to go off-road, or rather, I don't like going on any less than pristine gravel road, unless I'm positive I'm not going to get stuck. I generally have lousy cell service, and so I wouldn't be able to call AAA for a tow, and there's no guarantee somebody's going to be coming by to give me a hand anytime soon. Another vehicle consideration, B, what's the size of your rig? If you've got a secondary car or a bike or some other way to check out the road before you venture down some scrawny dirt road you're not familiar with, try to take the time to do a scouting mission. Find out, A, are you going to fit? And B, can you turn that sucker around or are you going to have to back it up? If you have to back it up, how far do you have to back it up? Are you comfortable with the fact you've got to back it up that far? So find out before you venture down some of these odd roads. Thirdly, regarding the vehicle, C, that scouting mission can also reveal the condition of the road. Are you going to run into some tractor-eating potholes up ahead? Or is it going to be like driving down a washboard for many miles? Remember that these areas are not necessarily going to be maintained to standards you normally find in a conventional campground. You got to use your head. Second thing we want to think about the weather forecast. Things might be terrific now, but is there snow, ice, or rain in the forecast? How will this affect you and your decision to boondock here? Is there any risk of a flash flood or getting stuck up a steep hill with an icy return when you're ready to head back down? You need to think ahead about what could mess up your plans. Do you have to cross a dry riverbed that might fill up with a heavy rain and make that road impassable until the water recedes? Are you prepared to wait it out if you do get stuck on the other side? You don't want to risk being swept away by trying to drive through it, particularly since chances are nobody's going to know where you are. And number 3, there's another environmental consideration to think about. Fire. Are you in a forest fire area? Remember, no one may know where you are, so you may not get any warning of some kind of evacuation. Your cell phone may not work for you to call and find out information either. If you are in wildfire country, try to stick closer to the main escape routes and check with the ranger before you set up camp, and I think it's a good idea to let them know where you are. Number 4, kind of ties in with this. Remember, you're probably going to be alone. Even though I've never met anybody on a trail that gave me the heebie-jeebies, doesn't mean bad guys aren't out there. So how vulnerable are you going to feel away from everyone? One night, I was in the Pisgah Forest in North Carolina, and a nasty thunderstorm was forecast. I did not feel comfortable staying on the ground in my tent. It had to be like 10 or 11 o'clock at night. I'd been to a program on the blue ghost fireflies that don't show up until it's after dark, so this program didn't finish until really late, and I was in the middle of this massive forest. I didn't feel like driving to a campground just to stay in my car, so I got this great idea that I would boondock on one of the forest roads. I was deep in the forest. I didn't feel like driving out, so like I said, I found this forest road that looked pretty good, drove down there, and I was looking for a place to pull over my car where I could kind of hide, just tucked off the woods just a little bit off the road. And after a couple miles, I didn't see anything that was suitable where I felt comfortable that I could get my car back out, because again, I had no four-wheel drive, just a regular Camry. So when I finally saw up ahead a grassy area just on the side of the road, I was like, it's like 11 o'clock at night. Who else is going to come out here? So I just pulled off the road to park. And so I did that, and I went to sleep in the back seat. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to hear a car approaching. I could hear the gravel of the wheels slowly getting closer to me. The only car that had come down this road that whole night was this one in the middle of the night. I don't know what time it was. I'm going to guess somewhere around 2 or 3. And I felt really vulnerable. I knew that the fog on my windows was an indicator and a clue that somebody was inside, so these people would know that there was a person in this car, not camping somewhere in the forest, who happened to park there. Like I said, I was feeling really vulnerable. My heart was pounding as the vehicle slowed down as it got close to me. It paused, and I'm still tucked down. I'm not looking up to look at them. I'm tucked down under the windows. So the car pauses as it comes to me, and then it continues on. I gotta say, it took a while for my heart rate to calm back down. I'm guessing it may have been a ranger, or it could have been a nice family that was late traveling and searching for a nice place for them to sleep as well, and just slowing down so they didn't hit me. I think one reason I felt nervous is because I've always had this backpacking rule that I would not camp within 2 miles of a road. And my thinking on that was that if somebody could carry a case of beer that they could drink, they might do things that they might ordinarily not do when they weren't under the influence. And so here I am sleeping on a road. So this was a big no-no against my normal camping things, even though I felt a little bit protected in my car. But the next night, in the same Pisgah forest, the forecast had improved. So I decided I was going to try to properly boondock in the forest and try this camping style for the first time. So on that morning, I was hiking, and I found this gorgeous campsite, maybe like a half a mile from where I parked, a little small parking area. Somebody would see my car, and they would know somebody was camping in the woods, but this is a big forest. They would have no idea where in the woods, so I kind of like that idea as well. And the way this trail went, you were up above, but down by the river, I found a flat area that was high enough in case of a flash flood. I think I was probably 10 or 12 feet above the river level, so I felt if another storm came through that night, I didn't have to worry about that. It was a beautiful setting, absolutely stunning setting. In fact, I'll put a photo on the website. And I felt pretty safe, even though somebody could see me if they were looking down, as I imagine they would be as they were walking up there. I didn't feel near as vulnerable as I did in the car. Nonetheless, I set up my camp, and then I tried to make it look like 2 people were staying there instead of just myself. I had a hammock, so I set that up, and then a tent. So, yeah, technically, it could be 1 person. It just looked like more than a single person would normally do. I was a little bit twitchy that first night, but then I settled in. I said, I think I could get used to this. This is pretty cool. And like I said, I've never met any bad people in the woods. I think that the outdoors tends to attract nice people. But I feel a little bit vulnerable as a solo female. Nonetheless, the second day I was like, okay, this is cool. I can do this. No problem. And the next day, even during daylight, if I saw fellow hikers, because people were using that trail, not a lot, but I'd see one every couple hours or so, I didn't have any problems with that. I was pretty cool with it. So I've now felt comfortable doing this. In civilization in the Pisgah, like I said, people were around. I had a little bit different situation my next boondocking experience, and that was in Wyoming this past summer. I was in the Bighorn National Forest, and I found this beautiful site, maybe 300 feet off a gravel road. I found a great place to tuck Sophie right wedged in right by the edge of the woods. I was still a little bit visible from the road, but you had to be paying attention to see me. And so I set up camp. I was thoroughly enjoying myself. Complete solitude with this magnificent forest, a stunning view of the ridgeline, really, really pretty. Vehicles rarely drove by. When I took a walk, I didn't see any campers anywhere near me. So later on that day, I'm sitting around reading, and a small dirty car turns and then comes towards gets off the road and turns towards my campsite and pulls in literally 50 feet from my campsite. And out of this dirty car, a long-haired young man in his 20s steps out, and he's alone. I'm alone. And if he turned out to be trouble, there's no way anybody would hear me scream. There's nobody anywhere around. I was on red alert when he approached me. It turned out that this polite young man had just graduated college and was heading west to start his new job. He was asking permission to camp so close to me. I never asked why he wanted to camp that close. Maybe he was a little nervous camping by himself. I have no idea. I never asked him. But I appreciated his gesture. And then looking back, I realized my little Sophie van was just as dirty as his. It's the gravel road making everything look dirty. And it just put me a little bit on edge. I'm not trying to scare you or discourage you from boondocking, but I do want you to do so with a clear mind and to do so as safely as possible. And with the understanding of your vulnerabilities so you can try to mitigate them. On the bright side, one of the beauties of boondocking is you can camp in some truly pristine settings. And that same solitude that makes you vulnerable also gives you the flip side, peace and quiet. Delicious, peaceful solitude. No noisy neighbors, no blocked views, nothing but you, your view, and your thoughts. So how long can you boondock at a given location? Each setting will have its own rules, but in general, you can usually stay on permitted federal lands for up to 2 weeks, although some have a shorter period. Again, check with the website and/or the ranger. When your time is up, you need to move to a different location at least 25 miles away. And this makes sense. We don't want folks squatting on our public lands permanently. You will find some exceptions, of course. Super popular areas, like the Bridger-Teton National Forest in Wyoming, has some areas that they only let you stay 3 days. It's just too close to the popular Grand Teton National Park. They want to make room for everybody. But I happen to know there's other forests around there that you seem to be able to stay longer, or else they aren't as well monitored. Because I have a girlfriend who lives nearby in Jackson, and she seems to keep her camper out there longer than the 2 weeks. And there's some that legally allow you to stay longer. At the Inyo National Forest in California, they'll let you stay there for 42 days. Again, the lesson here is ask. Find out what are the rules. On some BLM land, you can also get a long-term visitor permit, an LTVA permit for a nominal fee. This allows you to stay for several months. And while not free, some states will allow you to boondock in their state parks or state lands for a nominal fee as well. For example, in Arizona, you can buy a permit that allows you to boondock on state lands. Pretty cool. On the flip side, at the Walmarts, Bass Pro Shops, and Cabela's, generally speaking, you can only stay there 1 night, at most 2. Again, you got to check and find out. And a lot of the ones near touristy areas like beaches won't allow you at all, so you do need to check ahead of time and don't just assume that the Walmart will let you do it. Now let's talk a little bit more about boondocking etiquette and some other helpful tips. Number 1, naturally, you're going to want to follow the stated time frame restrictions of a particular place. Number 2, you're going to pick up a permit or pass as required. And I personally think it's a good idea to let the ranger know where you intend to be and for how long. Even if it's just a verbal mention, you never know. If something happens to you or in the area, they might just remember that they talked to you. Number 3, leave no trace. Super important. Hey, you're going out there to see this beauty. Leave it so that others for generations to come will enjoy it as well. You want to disturb the landscape minimally and leave the place ideally better than you found it. This means not building new campfire rings when one's already there. It also means not burning unburnables like metal, glass, and plastic. You may find you have to clean out an existing campfire ring. You're going to have to pack out all of your trash. And be nice. Pick up any trash people have left before you. If you haven't listened to the Adventure Travel Show podcast episode on Leave No Trace and outdoor etiquette, I'll put a link in the show notes. When going to the bathroom, especially if you're in a bigger group, try to make your cat holes spread out. I also personally like to poke a stick vertically in my little cat hole to tell the next camper that I was there. Do not bury your toilet paper. You need to pack that out. The animals are going to dig it up. I don't care what you say. They're going to do that. They're going to make a mess. Bring a little zip bag. Put your garbage in there. Toss it when you get back to town. Some places may not allow you to build a campfire altogether. You need to ask and find out the rules of wood collection. And if you're allowed to burn, do you have to buy the wood locally so you're not introducing pests? Ask. You don't want to be responsible for introducing an invasive species. And naturally, if you do make a fire, you want to make sure that fire is 100% completely, no question, completely out before leaving the site. We have all seen in the last few years in particular the devastation that wildfires have caused and the pain and suffering and property loss, life loss that these wildfires have caused. We don't want to be responsible for that. A single ember can travel a mile. In addition to the outdoor etiquette, I'm also going to put links in the show notes to my previous episodes on how to choose a campsite, how to build a fire, how to do that whole leave no trace and the whole outdoor etiquette, etc. Number 4, you want to try to choose a campsite that has been previously used so as not to mash down the grounds unnecessarily. And you're going to try to use areas where your vehicle is not going to hurt the grounds just by getting there. You don't want to choose a site where people would naturally walk through that looks like it might be a little path. You want to get away from that. And if at all possible, you don't be driving over anything other than something little grassy area or some kind of compacted area that's already down. Now, in some areas, you may find places they're going to tell you the opposite because they want people to not keep reusing the places because they want the land to regenerate. Again, it's really important. You got to ask the ranger so that we're doing what they want us to do so that they can keep the forest and the wildland as pristine as possible. So check with the rangers, find what those rules are, check, and then follow them. Number 5. Generally speaking, you have to camp at least 200 feet, and in some places 300 feet from a water source. Usually this is to prevent contamination of the water, but also remember, water is a super important resource for the wildlife. It's where they come to drink, and we don't want to be disturbing them. But there's places that too is an exception. Last year when I was in the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness, where I rafted the middle fork of the Salmon River in Idaho, because they get so little rain, we were told that there, our job was to actually pee directly in the river, not 200 feet away from it. And we packed out all, and I do mean all of our solid waste, if you know what I mean there. So it's super important to ask what the guidelines are for the area you're visiting. We want to keep things, like I said, pristine for the generations to come, and it's up to all of us to do our part. There may be rules about how far off the road you need to be. Number 6, try to figure out how you're going to deal with the lack of utilities and amenities. Okay, here's some tips here. If you have an RV, flush with your gray water instead of using your potable water. Consider getting a composting toilet. And don't be dumping your gray water on the ground. Wait until you get back to civilization. If you bring additional water tanks, don't forget they may not have the gray water capacity, so keep that in mind because you certainly don't want to have your system backing up. It's going to be pretty stinky and gross. So the goal is be super stingy with your water usage. Remember, you can usually pay a private RV park or campground to dump your waste once you get back out of the woods. And if you happen to have neighbors, be considerate of the noise if you use a generator. And please, for us non-generator folks that are sleeping outside in our tents and have no walls for any kind of insulation, please give us some quiet hours. Please. Those things are noisy. Consider getting or adding a solar panel or two up in your rig. My 2 panels give me about 2 days worth without sun. That's assuming I'm being modest with my usage. For me, my main concern is to keep my refrigerator running and happy. It's a good idea to test your rig at home before you head out so you have a good idea how long you can go on your battery. Number 7, Don't forget that in addition to figuring out how you're going to deal with utilities, you're going to need to prepare for your daily needs like food and water. There aren't going to be any places to buy anything, so you better plan on bringing it all. Number 8, if you have a pet, don't allow it to roam freely in the woods where it can harass the wildlife. Keep an eye on them. Number 9, while it's not likely, it's still best not to tempt a potential thief by leaving out anything valuable. Store such things out of sight and lock them up if possible. If you're worried about personal safety, consider a can of wasp spray. It can shoot 30 feet, would no doubt deter a bad guy if sprayed in his eyes. Some people prefer pepper spray, and I actually carry a little one whenever I go on a solo hike, and I keep one up by my driver's side in Sophie as well, just in case. If you're into firearms, be aware that different states have different rules, and infringements of these rules can be costly and or troublesome to you. Number 10. If you really like getting far off the grid, consider getting a satellite phone or one of those spot service devices that allow you to reach help even when you don't have cell service. They're expensive. They usually have a monthly fee. But if you find you're in the boonies a lot, it may be worth it. Number 11. Don't leave home without your emergency kit. Again, I'll have a link in the show notes. And also be sure to listen to my interview with my backpacking mentor, Casey, about wilderness first aid. Number 12. Does your vehicle have basic tools to fix the kinds of things that can go wrong? It's always a good idea to have just a basic toolkit in your vehicle. Number 13. Make sure you've got plenty, and that's in all caps, of gas. My camper heater runs off my engine's diesel, but it has a shutoff so I can't completely drain the tank. Nonetheless, it's a good idea to fill up before you head in the woods. Consider even bringing a small gas can of fuel if you feel like you can do that safely, or if you have any reason to worry. I personally just keep an empty can in my van in case I do get worried about this. Number 14. Let's talk about maps. Yes, phone apps are great, but please, please, please bring a hard copy just in case you lose your phone, drop your phone in the river, lose your charge, etc. Some of these forests are vast, and you won't be able to leave breadcrumbs to find your way out. When I boondocked in Bighorn National Forest in Wyoming, I picked up the most intimidating map at the ranger station. This forest is huge. Over 1.1 million acres. You heard me right, 1 million acres and more. So I decided I was not going to boondock any further than a mile or so off a decent gravel road, so I could always walk to a road that would have some traffic in case I needed help. I did not want to get lost in the maze that is that forest. It is ginormous. I'm going to put some links to good maps on the website, and ideally, if possible, you want to get a topographical map, particularly if you have a big rig. So how do you plan your boondocking adventure? I think it's fun to start by planning your adventure by just staring at the maps we just talked about. What looks interesting? What looks worth investigating? Get some post-it notes and put them in the areas that look like they might be good places to check out. And then head to the appropriate links that I've got on the page and get more information. Call the ranger's office, ask questions. They love to answer the questions. That's what they're there for. And remember to pay attention to the time of year, what possible weather conditions, and ask the rangers for some advice. The website for today's episode, adventuretravelshowpodcast.com/boondocking, has got a ton of links that are important. I'll also put that in the download that'll come out with next month's newsletter, so you want to make sure that you get that as well. These links have just got a ton of useful information. Like I'm always preaching on my podcast, it's great to stretch yourself just a little bit by going outside your comfort zone, just that little bit. I like to call it like a little +1 of what you're already doing, just that little extra. So let's look back at my own camping stories into boondocking. Number 1, when I started out camping, I camped with friends at a conventional campground. The next time, the next step, the next +1 was camping with friends boondocking in a national forest. And then we were boondocking in a group. Then from there, my next +1 was camping solo at a conventional campground. So I went back, but now I'm doing it by myself. And then from there, I did the solo boondocking in the car. Had a little bit of protection of the metal of the car in the national forest. From there, I did the actual camping down by the river, true boondocking in the national forest solo, but I was near the paved road. And then finally, I was boondocking off the gravel road, off the paved roads, solo in the massive forest of 1,000,000 acres. I probably wouldn't have had the courage to do that last step unless I did the ones previous, as I kept pushing myself just a little bit each time so that I would get just a little bit more comfortable doing all this. And it's the same thing with whether it's learning to boondock, learning to camp, learning to backpack, all those things. You just push yourself just that one little bit extra each time. And then that way you build your confidence, your experience, and your courage. However, if you're not completely sold on being so far off the grid and boondocking really far off the grid, consider a compromise. In some national and state parks, you can find a hybrid between a full hookup where you get all the utilities and boondocking. It's called primitive camping. You still pay, but you pay a lesser amount for this primitive site that offers no site-specific power or water. However, you're allowed to use the campground facilities. This means you can top up your water jugs, dump your sewage, take a shower, use the bathroom, etc. On my summer road trip with Sophie, I often alternated between the full hookup and the primitive sites depending on the weather and how much I needed power to produce the show. I have 2 solar panels on Sophie, but in cloudy weather, I didn't want to run out of juice and lose the food in my fridge. On average, I would say I paid around $25 if I was doing a full hookup and about $10 if it was just the primitive site. So the savings over time, if you're going to be gone a long time, can be substantial. But still, nothing beats free, like boondocking. So today we learned about how we can see some of the nation's most beautiful landscapes, all for free. I hope that's inspired you to get out there and try boondocking. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend and on your social channels. You are the #1 way that other adventurous folks find out about my podcasts. And write me at kit@activetraveladventures.com and let me know about your boondocking experiences. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on!